But okay, with that, so, I mentioned that I'm a therapist. I certainly come from the soft sciences myself. I recognize that particularly when we're talking about sex, the amount of available research is weak and incredibly limited.
Yeah.
There's so many holes, and so there is a little bit of like a fun and gun, wild, wild west, see what works and go with it mentality for a lot of these things. But at the same time, I'm wondering what kind of empirical supports, what kind of research y'all rely on as you're pursuing some of these practices.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of research by Tantra teachers that's not like scientific research published in scientific studies for other people to read. It's more like we've been doing these practices, we've been teaching them for many, many years and having our students come back and tell their stories, and it works over and over and over and over. Results vary by participant, of course.
Sure.
But it's really amazing how all these things really work. And we're impressed constantly by the stories people come back with. We're like, oh my God, I'm so impressed it works the way it did for you. But that's why we keep teaching, because we keep having the stories coming back from like so many of those students with all the experiences they have.
Yeah, it's been around for thousands of years, so something is working.
Sure.
And to your point, there's not a lot of studies around it, which is kind of sad. Like, they still don't really understand an orgasm, And I don't know if it's the shame or whatever around it that has stopped people from really studying it. But there are more and more studies coming out all the time. Mindfulness is one of the big things. In fact, I got a couple magazines, like the National National Geographic.
Slightly different level of academia.
At time.
Mindfulness is now a multi-billion-dollar industry because it's been proven that using your mind can create financial success as well as sexual. And your brain is your biggest sexual organ. So being able to use that and focus your energy and feeling with it is important. Yoga has been around for a while too. So as far as like improving your health, not only stretching and moving, but breathing. Breathing has been empirically proven to do things like decrease stress and anxiety and to help with focus, and it has all sorts of benefits that have proven there.
Yeah.
I know there's certainly still a data problem, but a friend of mine actually is a yoga therapist, and she's been discussing with me how they're starting to fill in that gap, starting to move forward. There's a great book I'd love to recommend that I will have to look up the title for and throw in the show notes, but Michael Yapko wrote a presentation kind of talking about the data problem specifically in meditation and mindfulness apps, but how there is like a path forward and people are beginning to gather that information and beginning to put, a little bit more of a rigor to all of this.
Yeah.
Another thing that
some of our students are scientists as well and totally geek out on trying to figure out how they can bring a scientific study forward proving all of this. And they've been going around with this little EKG machine to put on your head to measure brain waves, and it's on your phone, a little app, and having people do the cobra breaths for a few minutes, up to 5 minutes, and like measuring the brainwave activity. And like within 2 minutes, not even 5, the brainwave activity that goes from beforehand to after just a few cobra breaths, which is one of our main tantric practices we teach, it takes you straight into this state of deep relaxation and meditation, and it doesn't even take very long to do.
There are some studies, like Rutgers was doing a study on measuring orgasm, and they used MRI, and they were actually seeing if a woman could just achieve orgasm through her thoughts, which she was able to do, and so they've measured that. Another interesting thing is, one of the things, I was a personal development, aficionado, whatever, when before I got into Tantra, so I was always like trying to improve myself, and one of the foundation books of almost all personal development is called Think and Grow Rich. It was a book by Napoleon Hill. He was the first person to do a study of the most successful, richest people in the world. Spent 20 years. He was like sponsored by Andrew Carnegie. And so it was a study. It said, what are the factors that make people successful and rich? And sexual transmutation was one of the things, So, even there, they talk about Tantra and so forth. And, and energy is metaphysics is now showing and proving that a lot of stuff that we thought was real isn't, and it's kind of proving a lot of the stuff that the Western philosophies have been using for thousands of years. Before we came along, every culture you would use energy to heal, almost everywhere except here. So it's something that I'd love to get more of, and there's more studies about ecstasis states and different ways to achieve these higher level awakening experiences. But
as the science kind of catches up with the practice and everything that y'all have witnessed on a regular basis.
And here's the thing. When I came into this, I was the biggest skeptic. I was a workaholic. I was working 100 hours a week. I didn't believe any of this stuff. I thought it was all ridiculous. I was just a premature ejaculator, and I was just trying to get better at sex, and that's all I cared about. And that's another little tip, too, is like the average session for sex, I think, in America is like 10 minutes, but most women need about 30 minutes to before they're ready to even have an orgasm. So, I mean, that alone, because we teach you how to have prolonged orgasms, so being able to match that can just by itself have a big impact.
Dramatic effect on your sex. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, learning how to slow down in the whole process.
Yeah, connect. But the point of that is that I was so skeptical, but I just did enough that it was like, well, I'm getting what I came for. And then I learned something else, and I learned something else. And it's been like that for 23 years, especially when she came along. Like 11 years now, we've had like not only the best sex of our lives, but just these amazing experiences. Go, holy cow, I didn't know life could be this great. And then like a month later, it's like, holy shit, no one told us this was possible. And like, it's been like that almost every month for 11 years. And this last year, it's really gotten so like strange and weird that it's like I think of it as divine experiences because I have no other way to describe what I've been experiencing these days.
So I've got a quick question. I know, again, which lots of talk about the term energy and like what it is, and everybody has a different version of like what energy is defined as. And there are no correct definitions, there are only better definitions and worse definitions. But what do you consider to be energy?
That's a great question. And it is challenging to describe because before people feel it and understand it themselves, it's really hard to describe it to someone else. Mm-hmm. So I think of it all the way back into how metaphysics describes everything is just a whole bunch of vibrating particles vibrating together, and that's energy. It's the frequency of vibration. So in our bodies, when we're feeling energy, usually for me, it feels like vibration in my body. But there's a whole list of ways that it can feel in my body. But energy is, like I said, it's the vibration of our bodies and then how we're feeling it. So for me, a lot of times it feels like vibration, literally, like orgasms feel like vibration moving, the expansion, contraction of your body. Sometimes it also feels like a flow, like blood rushing through your body when you feel that rush or high from running or working out or whatever. Sometimes it feels for me like there's this spiral of what I call energy because I feel spiraling in my hands because we have these energy centers in the palms of our hands. Sometimes I feel like the expansiveness of the field, the auric field around my body expanding and getting bigger. And then there's the tapping into like feeling like my partner and like feeling that oneness connection or that oneness connection within a group or that oneness connection when I'm in nature and like feeling the vibration of energy that's all around me.
Yeah, I thought energy was all baloney. I just got to say that, and it took me years. She was naturally in tune with it. I didn't feel anything. I was like, are you kidding me? And people doing these wiggling things, they're called kriyas, and I was like, come on, you guys are conning or something. But if you stick with it, I don't care who you are. This stuff works, so just, my suggestion is try yourself and see. But to answer your question is like, I have no idea. Every time I think I understand what energy is, my world gets turned on its head about once a month. And it's like even my belief systems are completely redefined because I'm still learning and growing and haven't figured out where the end of it is. All I know is it's an amazing ride.
I have to say that it always feels to me like energy is just not, like that word just can't encapsulate what we're experiencing enough. Sure. It's like we need some other word here.
I mean, it's an awkward struggle to try and put terminology to these things. And I mean, myself having a clinical hypnosis background, I can certainly appreciate that, this reality that there are experiences that you're struggling to label. There are things that you're witnessing happening that you're having a hard time maybe like finding the root of or the cause of. Yeah. But I guess my question is, is it necessary from your perspective to label that as divine, or is it one thing to call it ununderstandable or not yet understood, or do you truly feel that there's something magical about it?
Whenever we're teaching courses as well, I'm like, God, divine, source, energy, the universe, whatever you want to call it. It's like,
we're kind
I
of
don't
struggling
even
to
know
put a term
how
to
to
it.
label it, but however you want to label it and describe it yourself. It is hard.
The short answer is no. It doesn't, it doesn't matter what you believe. Again, as I said earlier, we have all different belief systems around it, but it's a practice that if you do it over time, it starts making a difference. And you'll have the results regardless of what you believe. I mean, that's what I was saying. As I keep having results in spite of my beliefs, it's like, what the heck? I didn't think this was possible.
Yeah.
But it's, I said that last year has been divine for me because I just see so many miracles on a regular basis now that are like serendipity that's statistically improbable, that it makes me believe that there's some kind of divine intelligence at work. That,
You're using all the trigger words.
I'll say that, so I grew up Christian, but when I started having sex, I had a crisis of faith. I'm like, I don't know if I can consider myself Christian anymore. Now I have just too many problems with Christianity. Yep. And then whenever we started having these amazing experiences in our love life, which really happened when this one came along, it was just like, and we started having these.
I mean, that kind of encapsulates the conversation because you say, because, thankfully we don't put out a transcript of this show, but the reality is there's not a good word to describe a phenomena of this, of this high order.
And you start, and so I didn't have anything anybody else telling me about it before I experienced it. And then it's like, how do we describe what just happened? How do we put words on this? How do you relate this with others? So our best word that we've come up with is divine because we don't know what other word to use.
And I was an atheist and an agnostic, and then I explored other religions, and now I marry people. So it's like I become a spiritual leader in spite of myself.
I know. I stray away from using the word God because I'm like, I don't want to trigger people who don't like the word God. I'm like, well, source, divine. I don't know what other word to use. I mean, do y'all have words that y'all use for that experience and that connection that is beyond ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, language really does fail, especially when we're talking about an experience that's so far out of the norm. And I guess when I say that, what I really mean is that y'all's business model wouldn't function if we didn't live in a society where this type of thing was the norm. And we can look back at anthropology and primatology and evolutionary science and all of these things and try to piece together what we think our bodies probably kind of maybe evolved to do. But in any case, we recognize that we exist in a society that is completely alienated from the sexual experiences that allowed us to exist as a species. And so with that being the case, it makes sense that we are really floundering to, I guess, put labels or to describe these kinds of things because it's so far outside of the universe that we live on a daily basis. I mean, there's no NBC sitcom where the main character is a tantric teacher, unless it's just to label her as a weirdo or something along those lines.
We're working on that.
Yeah, there you go. It sounds exciting.
And really, the English language itself is just kind of fails. Now, whenever I'm studying Sanskrit, all of a sudden there's a whole host of words to describe everything. But I can't even keep them all straight because I'm not that best at remembering all the Sanskrit words. And you spit those out to people and they sure don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I could give an example, if you don't mind, is so one of my first spiritual experiences was we had just made love for many hours and we were camping outside, so there was nature and everything. And she had gone to the restroom and was coming back, and when I just closed my eyes and I was missing her, and I was, and then she laid down and I just visualized these two balls of light merging, and then I felt myself go up into the sky, and then I felt such amazing levels of joy and bliss and energy. I mean, I was literally like laughing hysterically. Tears were pouring out of my eyes. I thought it was going to explode, and then it was over in like a second. And I was going, what the fuck was that? Excuse my language. And, and then it was like, it was so intense. And I've had a lot of amazing experiences in this body, but this was so beyond what anything I ever experienced. I could only define it as heaven or bliss or something. Mm-hmm. But there was also a knowingness. There was like a oneness where I felt at one with the universe. And I felt that our spirits, love, light, goodness, it was all the same. And so it gave me an experience that I knew that my soul was eternal at that point. I knew that we were soulmates, that our souls have been together for a long time and they'll be together forever. And and logically it doesn't make any sense, but I had an embodied experience of it, which made me a believer. And then I've had so many other crazy experiences since then that you'll really think I'm crazy if I keep.
I'd say the best way to describe my most intense spiritual experiences is that it feels like I become connected into the love that's all around me. So it feels like the energy of love just starts pouring in. And I'm like orgasming with it too, by the way. I'm like, love! And I feel like it's just like pouring in and like dancing through my body. And I experience it the most when I'm in nature. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I'm tapping into like the elements, into plants, into like just all of nature that's surrounding me is like pouring
reducing
love
that alienation and feeling just more connected to, I guess, more of the basics connection. Of who you are. Yeah.
And what also makes us real is it's not just us, it's a bunch of us. Like we were stuck in a storm once camping, and with every lightning bolt that came down, we'd all stop and we were going into orgasm, with the lightning bolts. It's like, what the heck? It's like,
we're walking around, we're not even having sex.
Yeah. And then like I've had experiences where I didn't even believe in past lives. I'm still not sure what I believe, but I was hugging some other people, and we go into like an orgasmic hug, which we talked about earlier, and then all of a sudden we're having memories of past lives together, and all three of us are remembering our lives and previous things, and we just started crying like, I missed you, and then we start laughing how ridiculous this is, and we go back into orgasm. It was like an hour and a half hug of like a time-gasm. It was really bizarre. So but it makes me go, maybe there's something more out there than logic can explain. One thing I will say about empirical evidence, which I think is interesting, is that over time, the vast majority of what we think is fact is proven false. And so it's like, we don't really know what we don't know. And, over time,
rebuilding models and figuring out more.
Yeah. So, I think time will tell that eventually they'll explain this stuff, but it's certainly not now.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair point, is that we are just kind of grappling with wrapping our mind around all these things. With that, you mentioned Sanskrit, and we're talking about something that in a lot of ways is tied to ancient Hinduism as well as ancient Buddhism. And I guess with all of that, as you're kind of like lifting these concepts, I wonder if there's a struggle at any point in, I guess, keeping things separate. What I mean by that is grabbing the aspects of it that connect to Tantra, that connect to meditation, that connect to these things that are practical, that are coming from these religious and cultural traditions.
Yeah, I don't think that it really matters so much, in that it's like it's an evolution. It's like Tantra is expanded in so many ways. I mean, Qigong and acupuncture and almost all yoga, and so many things have evolved out of it. So it's like, to me, I'm about using the best of what's available. So you said it earlier, like we use whatever tools we have. We also use modern music, and we use anything that we can and even technology like getting biofeedback and so forth. Some we're exploring more. We use whatever's available to create the biggest breakthroughs and expansion of our minds that we can. And so I don't think it matters so much where it comes from, because we also have multiple teachers, and some of it is like a lineage we follow for 1,000 years. Other people are neo-tantra that just make it up as they go. It's like, so there's a lot of different things we pull from. So we pull from everything.
Go in with what works.
Yeah, I mean, the personal development stuff, I spent like $100,000 in 10 years doing all these different programs, from Tony Robbins to Lifestream, Landmark, all this stuff. And I incorporated all that And I have a sexual empowerment workshop where we look at what is your psychological blueprint, what is the stuff that you believe, that your limiting stories you create when you're 5. And I mean, that's just an important part of what we do as a tantra. So we use everything, and it's for anybody who is willing to really have the courage to take themselves on and look.
There's a whole debate around classical tantra versus neo-tantra. Before we went to a tantra festival, we never even heard people use those terms before. We're like, is tantra? Our teachers never used those terms.
We use what works.
We definitely use a little bit of both, but some of the teachers who passed down a lot of the practices that we used, like 2 generations ahead of us, went to the East and collected these practices and brought them back. And they come from a few areas of the East. They're not just from one particular lineage, from one particular place.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really deal with the religions. We do is we try to take what works and separate it from the past and just say, hey, just try this. Figure out for yourself if you like it, and people do.
So there's sort of a curiosity, I suppose, about just being willing to sample and try and see what works.
Yeah. And everyone's different. So even though these things will give you measurable, repeatable, results, everyone's a little different. So I can't tell you exactly which we'll get out of a weekend.
Sure.
But people have saved their marriages. People have prevented suicides. It's like, but most people just get more joy and energy and an amazing love life.
Well, I know we talked about doing some demonstrations and maybe some skills to take home. Before we do that, Vi, did you have any last questions?
I still have so many questions.
Yeah.
But I think we've covered pretty much everything, at least at a basic level.
Yeah. Yeah, well, certainly. And we've got, of course, links to y'all's website and Facebook and all kinds of things in the footnotes of the episode. But I guess I should tell people that y'all are at ecstatichearts.com.
Yep.
I've got workshops coming up. I mean, really, I'd say there are a bunch coming up, but it seems like there are always a bunch coming up. So folks here in the area, there's tons of opportunities to get involved. There's also the online videos and other things for folks that are not here in Austin. But with that, show us, I guess, a little bit about what this kind of looks like.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the practices that I love for whenever I'm beginning my practice, as well as I use during our lovemaking, it's both a grounding and centering practice as well as a transmutation breath. And transmutation means I'm drawing energy up from my pelvis and my sex up my body so that I can kind of like pull that energy, that pleasure, that sensation up my body. Mm-hmm. And
that's what allows you to separate ejaculation from orgasm for men, which we didn't really get into, but that's an important skill.
Yeah,
and how to feel full body orgasms in general for men and women and any gender.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just a nice practice that I like to start with, and it's something that I like to use during sex whenever I'm feeling a lot of energy in my sex to pull it up my body. So I call it the heart breath. Mm-hmm. And I sit with my spine straight, and I breathe, imagining like I'm breathing from my pelvic floor, so like pussy or a lingam.
That's penis.
And just breathing it up our bodies to my heart as my inhale.
Deep breath.
Our sound engineer loves when we do yoga breaths into these things.
And then exhaling out my heart with an
Go ahead and try this if you're listening or watching at home.
Yeah, if you are listening to the podcast version while at the gym, please go ahead right now, as you will.
Mm-hmm. So inhale from your pelvic floor up to the heart.
You're visualizing it moving up.
Inhaling through the nose. Holding it at the heart, letting it build there. Then exhaling with an
So, basically, if you slow down your breath and you breathe deeper, you're like enhancing the sensation, and it's enabling you to connect more deeply. And so many people are trying to rush to the end and get, to the end of sex, but the joy is the journey, So one of the things we teach in Tantra is don't be so focused on the end result, but enjoy the ride.
Yes, sex is not orgasm, I think is an important thing to say. And we can, of course, look at the word orgasm and separate it out from words like climax or ejaculation or these other complexities. But yeah, I do think that at a very basic level, if we had to wrap this show tomorrow, I would hope that the message that we've gotten out is that sex is so much more than a penis ejaculating inside of a vagina. It's so much more complicated and offers so many more opportunities to all different types of people having all different types of experiences. So,
I'll give you one more tip.
Wait.
Okay.
I'm not done with mine.
Okay.
So one of the things that I just want to emphasize about the heart breath is the ah. And so many times people are really shy about making sound or letting that sigh come out or really letting the ah come out. But the
is there something specific about tone, volume, the word that you're saying? I mean,
yes, and yes.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
So ooh is not getting the same effect.
The different sounds correspond with different parts of our bodies.
Okay.
So with this particular breath, saying the ah is the sound of the heart. So the ah physically vibrates the heart and helps to open the heart up. And by drawing the ah out, it just draws out the energy so that you can have a more expanded experience. And by making it loud, this goes back to our second tip. Making sound while you're having sex, especially during your orgasm. But by remembering to breathe and to make sound, long, drawn out, audible sound, connects our sex and our sex center up through our bodies. And it also helps us to connect with our partners, as when they're able to hear us breathing, they're able to harmonize and to tap in with us and to sync up with us.
It also has a Pavlov effect. So, if I get turned on enough and she makes the same sound, sometimes she can just make the sound and I get turned on.
Start that association. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a benefit.
Yeah, and another time that we can use this heart breathing is you can lay cuddling side by side facing your partner and just breathe from the pelvic floor up the heart, out the heart with the ah, and you're connecting hearts to heart, and you're helping to harmonize your bodies together and harmonize your hearts together and help to connect your bodies together in that heart-centric field.
And so my quicker version is make sound, especially when you orgasm.
Yeah.
Most people don't do that, especially us men or masculine. We're like, we tend to be quiet because we're taught it's something shameful to do quickly.
The fact that you're even having sex is already problematic.
Right?
So let's get
don't
this
need to draw attention to it.
Quiet. Yeah, don't. Yeah, absolutely. That is so much messaging that we hear.
However, when you vocalize, not only does it have psychological effects, but it opens up a channel of energy within your body. And so the louder your volume, the more breath you have, the more energy you'll be moving, and the more you'll feel. Your emotions are a big component of this too. But basically, if you want to double the intensity of your orgasm tonight, just scream during your orgasm, and and even
take
that's
a deep
hard.
breath and scream again.
And scream again. Yeah, as
Maybe
long
clue
as
your
you're
partner into the fact that you're going to do this before.
do tell
Tip them off, and depending on your circumstances, you may even give your roommate a heads up,
Well, here's
just
the thing.
in case.
If you have a nosy neighbor, or if you have a kid or something that it's you don't feel empowered to scream, grab a pillow, stick it on your face, and scream into the pillow. That works
Take
just
that
as
physical
well.
experience.
Yeah, and you.
Don't stick it on your partner's face.
Yeah, that's not good etiquette.
Not without consent. I mean, you should really negotiate those things beforehand.
But yeah, try it out. And as long as you're vocalizing, your orgasm will continue. So you can take a breath, scream, get it out, take another breath, scream, and see if you can milk, 3 or 4 screams out of your next orgasm and see for yourself what happens. Yeah.
So that's another reason why the heart breath is so important, is just a few minutes of conscious breathing influences your unconscious breathing. So if you begin your experience by doing the heart breath and getting into letting that sound come out and come up through your heart, your body will be more open and receptive to the experience of letting sound move through your body throughout your entire sexual experience and having deeper breath throughout the entire sexual experience.
And this is a practice. So just like martial arts or dancing or whatever, the more you do it, the better you get at it. When you first start doing it, you might go, I was like, ugh. You know, it didn't really do much. So, you know, it's okay. Be patient with yourself. Start wherever you are and stick with it, because it's the real power of Tantra happens months, years later after just doing these simple practices for like 5 minutes a day.